Stella Farms. My father stopped preaching the second he said my name. The entire church went silent so fast I could hear somebody drop a pen 3 rows behind me. Pastor Daniel Farms, my father, stood at the pulpit gripping the microphone with both hands. A minute earlier, he'd been talking about honesty and sacrifice. Now he was staring directly at me like I was a stranger. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. Beside him, my mother held a white offering envelope against her chest. "There's no easy way to say this," my father said. "Several $1,000s are missing from this church." A wave of whispers rolled through the sanctuary. Then he said, "And Stella was the last person seen near the counting room." My stomach dropped. People turned toward me all at once. Faces I'd known my entire life suddenly looked suspicious, judgmental, curious. Someone behind me whispered, I knew something was off lately. I opened my mouth. "Dad, I didn't." "Confession is the first step to forgiveness," my mother cut in sharply. The humiliation hit harder because I realized immediately this wasn't spontaneous. They'd planned this. Every detail. The dramatic pause. The envelope in my mother's hands. The way the deacon was already moving toward the aisle like he expected me to bolt. And the worst part? Some people looked relieved. Like they finally had an explanation for why I'd stopped helping count offerings a few weeks earlier. My father stepped away from the pulpit slowly. "Stella," he said, his voice calm, in that terrifying way pastors use when they want the room on their side. "Before this gets worse, tell the truth." I looked toward my younger brother near the front row. He wouldn't even look at me. Phones were already out. I could see screens pointed in my direction. "I didn't steal anything," I said. My father nodded once like he'd expected that answer. The security team already reviewed records. That sentence changed the room instantly. People leaned away from me. An elderly woman near the choir shook her head in disappointment. My mother's eyes watered as she said, "We raised you better than this." Something inside me snapped. Not loud, not dramatic. Just final. I stood up slowly, hands shaking so badly I curled them into fists. "If you already decided I'm guilty," I said, staring directly at both of them, "why are you pretending this is about truth?" Nobody answered. I grabbed my bag and walked toward the back doors while whispers exploded behind me. "She's leaving. That tells you everything." Oh my God. I reached the entrance. Then a voice shouted from the back of the sanctuary. "Then why was Pastor Daniel in the counting room alone last Thursday?" The entire church froze. My father turned sharply toward the crowd, and for the first time all morning he looked scared. The second I stepped into the side hallway, my mother grabbed my arm hard enough to stop me. "Do not walk out of this church," she hissed. I pulled free immediately. "You already humiliated me in front of everyone." "We are trying to protect this family," she snapped. A few seconds later, my father came through the sanctuary doors behind us, forcing them shut with more strength than necessary. The muffled sound of church members talking carried through the walls. He lowered his voice. "If you leave now, people will assume you're guilty." I stared at him in disbelief. "You already told them I was." His jaw tightened. "You've been acting rebellious for months. You stopped helping with offerings. You disappeared from youth events. What exactly did you think people would believe?" That hit because part of me already knew the answer. For weeks, people had been looking at me differently. Ever since I questioned the donation records. "I stopped helping because the numbers didn't match," I said quietly. "And when I asked you about it, you banned me from the counting room." My father stepped closer. "Careful, Stella." The warning in his voice made my stomach turn. A memory flashed through my mind, hearing my parents arguing late at night through the vents in my bedroom floor. "We just need more time. We can't keep covering this. Nobody can find out. At the time, I thought it was normal financial stress. Now I wasn't so sure. Stella, I turned. My younger brother stood halfway down the hallway, pale and nervous. He glanced behind him before speaking fast. I saw Dad in the counting office last week after everybody left. My father's expression changed instantly. Ethan, my mother warned sharply. He had bags with him, my brother continued. Black ones, and enough. My mother grabbed his shoulder and pulled him back toward the sanctuary before he could finish. Ethan looked terrified. Not of me, of them. My phone buzzed repeatedly in my hand, 3 texts from church friends. Is this true? What happened? People are posting about it already. I opened social media and felt my chest tighten. Someone had uploaded a video of me walking out during service less than 5 minutes earlier. Comments were already pouring in. Pastor's daughter stole from the church? Knew she was trouble. So embarrassing for that family. I locked the screen immediately. I'm not going back in there, I said. My father's face hardened. If you leave this church today, don't expect people to forget it. I looked him directly in the eye. I won't. I turned and walked through the front doors into the parking lot before either of them could stop me. Cold air hit my face. For a second, I thought I could finally breathe again. Then I heard someone call my name. Stella. Mr. Avery, the church accountant, approached slowly from the far end of the lot. He looked around carefully before handing me a folded sheet of paper. Your father didn't expect anyone else to notice the numbers, he said quietly. I unfolded the paper. Rows of handwritten offering totals covered the page. None of them matched the official reports I'd seen inside the church office. My pulse started hammering. Before I could speak, my phone suddenly rang. Unknown caller. I answered cautiously. Hello? A calm, older voice replied immediately. Stella, this is Chairman Lewis from the church board. We need you to come back inside. Right now. I stayed frozen beside my car while church members streamed through the front doors in clusters, whispering and staring in my direction. Chairman Lewis spoke again through the phone. The situation is escalating fast. The board is holding an emergency meeting. I looked back at the church entrance. Why would I walk back in there after what just happened? Because if you don't, he said carefully, people will assume your silence means guilt. I almost laughed at how unfair that sounded. But he wasn't wrong. 10 minutes later, I walked back into the church through the side entrance instead of the sanctuary. The same building I'd grown up in suddenly felt hostile. The board meeting had already started by the time I entered the conference room. My father sat near the head of the table beside my mother. Neither of them looked surprised to see me, like they knew I'd come back. Chairman Lewis motioned toward an empty chair. Sit down, Stella. The room smelled like old coffee and paper files. 7 board members sat around the table, all avoiding eye contact with me. Except Mr. Avery. He stood quietly near the back wall. My father slid a stack of printed financial reports across the table. These are offering records tied to volunteer shifts Stella worked over the last 2 months. One board member flipped through the pages slowly. The shortages are significant. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. She's been struggling spiritually for a while now. We tried to help her privately. I stared at her in disbelief. You're making me sound unstable. Linda looked down instead of answering. A board member finally looked directly at me. Stella, did you take any money from the offering counts? No. The answer came out instantly. My father leaned back in his chair. Then explain why these shortages happened during your shifts. I reached into my bag and placed Mr. Avery's handwritten totals onto the table. The room shifted immediately. Chairman Lewis frowned as he compared both sets of numbers side by side. These don't match because somebody altered the official records, I said. My father scoffed. Handwritten notes are not evidence. They are when the bank deposits don't match either, Mr. Avery said quietly from the back. Several heads turned toward him. I swallowed hard before continuing. I stopped volunteering because envelopes started disappearing before deposits were made. The room went silent again. One board member narrowed his eyes. Why didn't you report this immediately? Because I was scared, I thought. Scared nobody would believe the pastor's daughter over the pastor himself. I tried asking my father about the numbers first, I said. After that, he removed me from the counting team. My father slammed his palm against the table. This is ridiculous. She's inventing stories because she got caught. My mother started crying softly beside him. I don't even recognize her anymore. The timing was perfect. Suddenly, I looked like the cold daughter attacking her devastated parents. One board member sighed heavily. Until this is sorted out, maybe Stella should be suspended from church involvement publicly. My chest tightened. They were actually about to make it official. Then the conference room door opened. Mr. Avery walked inside, carrying 3 thick accounting binders. I think you should see these first, he said. My father stood up so quickly his chair scraped loudly against the floor. What are you doing? Mr. Avery set the binders on the table. These records were altered repeatedly over the last 6 months. That's a lie, my father snapped. Mr. Avery looked directly at him. No, he said calmly. I finally checked the security timestamps. Nobody moved. Then, slowly, every person in that room turned toward Pastor Daniel Farms. Chairman Lewis stood up immediately. Pull the security footage. My father didn't move. There's no point, he said. The camera system glitches constantly. That's convenient, one of the board members muttered. For the first time that entire day, the room wasn't looking at me anymore. It was looking at him. My mother sat rigid beside him, clutching her tissue so tightly her knuckles had turned white. Chairman Lewis motioned toward the office hallway. Now, nobody argued. A few minutes later, we crowded into the church administration office while the security system loaded onto an old desktop monitor. The silence felt unbearable. My father stayed near the doorway instead of coming closer. Mr. Avery opened one of the binders beside the keyboard. These dates matched the altered deposit records. The footage finally appeared. A timestamp from Thursday night filled the screen. The counting room door opened, and my father walked in alone. Nobody spoke. Another clip played from the following week. Same room, same late hour, same black bag in his hand. My father crossed his arms tightly. I was reorganizing deposits. Mr. Avery clicked forward again. This time the footage showed him removing several offering envelopes from a lockbox and placing them into the bag. A board member whispered, "Oh my God." Chairman Lewis turned slowly toward my father. Daniel explained this, I already did. But his voice didn't sound steady anymore. Mr. Avery slid several deposit slips across the desk. The bank records are short by thousands compared to what church members donated. The room erupted. People started talking over each other. How long has this been happening? Were donations stolen? What else was altered? Then my mother suddenly spoke up. I knew money was missing. Everything stopped. My father snapped toward her. "Linda, you said you were going to replace it," she said shakily. "You promised this was temporary." Chairman Lewis stared at both of them in disbelief. "You accused your own daughter publicly to stop people from checking the records?" Nobody answered. Then a small voice spoke from behind me. I heard them planning it. My younger brother stood near the office doorway, pale and trembling. My father's expression hardened instantly. "Ethan, go upstairs." But Ethan didn't move. I heard Mom say people would believe Stella took it because she already looked rebellious. The silence after that felt crushing. One of the board members slowly sat down like his legs had given out. Another covered her mouth with both hands. And then something happened I never expected. An older church member looked directly at me and said quietly, "I'm sorry." Others started joining in. Not loudly, not dramatically, just ashamed. My father suddenly exploded. "After everything I've done for this church?" He shouted, "You're all turning on me because of bookkeeping mistakes?" "Bookkeeping mistakes?" Chairman Lewis repeated. He looked around the room. All in favor of removing Pastor Daniel Farms from active pastoral duties effective immediately. Hands went up one after another. My father stared at them like he genuinely couldn't believe it. I didn't stay to watch the rest. While arguments erupted behind me, I walked out of the office, down the hallway, and through the church doors into the dark parking lot. I had almost reached my car when I heard footsteps behind me. Stella. Chairman Lewis hurried toward me carrying a thick manila folder. His face looked grim. "There's one more thing you deserve to know." He handed me the folder. I opened it and saw loan documents, credit records, and account statements all opened in my name. For a few seconds, I couldn't even process what I was looking at. My name sat at the top of every page. Credit cards, personal loans, late payment notices. One account had been opened when I was 16. "This has to be a mistake," I whispered. Chairman Lewis shook his head slowly. "The audit uncovered connected financial records. Your father used your information." My hands started shaking so badly the papers slipped against each other. All day I thought the worst thing my parents had done was accuse me in front of the church. I was wrong. They had been preparing me to take the fall long before that Sunday service ever started. "The missing donation money," I said weakly. Chairman Lewis exhaled heavily. "Your father was trying to cover gambling debts, sports betting, failed investments. The church funds were used temporarily to keep creditors away. Temporarily. Like stealing from people who trusted him was some short-term inconvenience." I stared back at the church building behind us. Just a few hours earlier, my father had stood at the pulpit acting righteous while destroying my reputation in front of hundreds of people. And my mother helped him do it. Not because they believed I stole, because they needed everyone else to believe it first. Something inside me cracked then. Not loud, not dramatic, just deep enough that I knew things would never go back to normal. Over the next few days, my phone never stopped buzzing. Voicemails from church members, texts from people apologizing. I should have asked questions sooner. "We trusted him too much. I'm sorry we believed it." Some admitted they assumed I was guilty immediately because my father sounded so convincing from the pulpit. Videos from the service spread online faster than I expected. First, the accusation, then rumors about the investigation, then confirmation that church finances were actually being audited. By the end of the week, everyone knew. Pastor Daniel Farms had been removed permanently. Criminal investigators became involved after missing donation records were confirmed. The identity fraud connected to my name made things even worse. My mother resigned as church treasurer 2 days later. People who once surrounded her after every service suddenly avoided her completely. Several families left the church entirely after learning leadership had ignored financial warning signs for months. And my younger brother moved in with relatives after refusing to defend our parents publicly. My mother kept trying to contact me. Long voicemails, emotional messages, excuses. "I never wanted this to happen. We can fix this. Please answer." I never did. About a month later, I returned to the church one final time to collect a few boxes from the office upstairs. The sanctuary was empty. No music, no whispers, no eyes following me. I stood near the exact spot where my father accused me of stealing. I remembered how small I felt that morning, how quickly people turned against me, and how badly I used to want their approval. Mr. Avery met me near the front pews carrying my last storage box. "The board wants to clear your name publicly next Sunday," he said carefully. "They want the congregation to hear the truth." I looked around the silent room. Sunlight came through the stained glass windows, stretching across empty chairs where people once judged me without hesitation. Then I shook my head. "I spent my whole life begging people here to believe the best about me," I said. "I'm done needing permission to leave." A few months later, I moved to another town and started working at a small community arts center. It wasn't glamorous, but nobody there knew me as the pastor's daughter. Nobody watched me like I owed them perfection. For the first time in my life, my money, my choices, and my future actually belonged to me. Meanwhile, the man who controlled an entire church lost everything that authority once protected. And the girl he blamed in front of everyone became the only person people still believed. The last time I walked out of that church, nobody followed me. And that's how I knew I was finally free.